evening and welcome to Public Space Sri Lanka. Whenever there's a drought, we brace ourselves for power cuts. The water levels in the reservoirs is now going down, so once again there's talk of power shortages. In the meantime, the world prices of crude oil has been going up, and this makes the possibility of power cuts all the greater because thermal power will be that much more expensive to generate. So we'll have to watch the price movements of oil over the next few weeks. We could be looking at increased fuel costs, rising electricity bills if these international price movements continue upwards. To discuss this and the future of the energy sector in Sri Lanka, we have in the studio tonight Mr. Asoka Abegunawardena, Chairman of the Strategic Enterprises Management Agency, Mr. Kanchana Siriwardena, Director Tariff and Economic Affairs of the Public Utilities Commission of Sri Lanka, and Mr. Vidura Ralapanawa, who is an environmentalist. We welcome you all to the program tonight. Mr. Abegunawardena, now, should we panic? I mean, the prices of oil have gone up. I mean, at one point it was $27 a barrel. Now it's somewhere near the $50 mark. Now we had a situation where it was over $100, I mean, just 24 months ago. So should we panic? I mean, at this stage, because we are dependent on oil for, for not only for fuel, but also to some extent for in terms of generating electricity. So how do you think it will work out in the?
Actually, for the power sector, now we have a less impact on the electricity pricing due to increasing oil prices worldwide, because we have energy mix right now which give an adequate cushion through the other means by hydropower, and also we have now 900 megawatts of coal power. But for the transport sector, it will be a key issue. However, now we have an issue of meeting the demand in Sri Lanka in the power sector. Now we need to consider two issues when we are discussing about the power sector requirements. One issue is, do we have adequate energy for us to provide it to the consumers to generate for their use, meaning annual requirement, we can be satisfied that. And the other issue is whether we can meet the peak demand, which is another factor, because now we are aware that the hydropower, we have a significant amount of hydropower. There we are depending on reservoirs. When the reservoir levels goes down, though the capacity is there, we won't be able to utilize that. So because of that reason, the hydropower will contribute to generate adequate energy for meeting the annual requirement. Whereas during the dry season, we have an issue because we won't be able to utilize all the hydropower potential we have, the capacity. Because of that reason, mainly during the hours from 6:30 to 9:30, we have the peak, night peak, during which time there may be a possibility of not having adequate power plants to meet that demand. So two different things. When we are discussing about the dry season, the dry period, we don't have adequate water reserves in the reservoirs. Then how to meet the daily requirement is an issue, and on the other hand, how to meet the peak demand is another issue. So at present, we have certain additional power plants in place. We have coal power plant 900 megawatts. If we can utilize to its maximum, then we will be covering a fair share of our requirement. But unfortunately, in recent past, we had experienced number of difficulties with the coal power plants. We believe it's due to certain substandard quality issues and due to some technical issues which should have been looked after by the experts in the sector, the decision makers. And there's another issue, though the power plant is operating, still we have an issue of transmitting it to the center, the load center. It's not properly matched, so though the plants are in operation, we do not have a cushion for us to transmit it. So there are a number of issues, and at present it's much better than which was there about 6 months ago, because the power plants were not in operation in a proper way, and when there is a sudden something happening in the system, these power plants shouldn't be have any issues, but at present we have witnessed that even in January, with there were though we had enough power, there were issues relating to breaking down the power plants, and also now how to get that back to the system, that takes few days. I mean, it should have been few seconds, but so there were a number of technical issues associated with the coal power plant in Puttalam, and that is the core issue for the existing crisis we are discussing. But on the other hand, now we are witnessing that the water levels in the reservoirs are low. So as a result, we need to go for oil-fired power plants. We have excess power, but as you mentioned, it's a little bit costly. So that will have an impact in the long run for the coming years, the price of electricity as well. So we need to be cautious, because at present we can manage, but definitely for the next 2-3 years we have no new power plants coming. So the situation will be aggravating. So we need to have a special emphasis how to meet this increase in demand, where we generally we assume that there is about 6% growth rate, annual growth rate. So by 2020 we may need another 300 gigawatt hours of 3000 gigawatt hours of energy in addition to what we are consuming right now. So for that the CEB plans has no answer. So we need to have an aggressive program for the demand side management, and also to tap the long term beneficially the power plants which can give long term benefits such as renewable energy. Otherwise we need to go for emergency power, which is very expensive. That will have a huge impact on the Sri Lankan economy.
Yeah, talking about the general prospects of the energy sector, Mr. Sirivardhana. Now, in the 80s, all the hype was about generating hydroelectricity, and there were lots of new projects started at that time. But today, I mean, it's just we can't even discuss hydroelectricity anymore. I mean, there were the mini hydroelectricity plants, but even that potential is now virtually exhausted. Is it not the case? And I mean, how do you, what are the alternatives available? Now, as Mr. Abeygunawardena said, this if no new power plants are coming up in the near future, then where do we stand?
Yeah, you are correct regarding hydro potential. Large hydro potential we have almost exhausted. About 1300 is already in line, and another say 200 or so is under construction. So those plants will add up. Those are not very big. And in case of mini hydros also, we have added up about 300 megawatts so far, and another 100 megawatt or so is in pipeline. So those plants will come, but it will take a little bit of time because of construction time and all. If we are looking at indigenous alternatives, we are left with wind power, solar power, and the biomass which we can look upon, and those sources have now become competitive with conventional sources. So we can rely on them as well.
No, in the short term, is that possible? We are talking about say 2 to 3 years. In the next 2 to 3 years, is it possible to rely on these alternative sources? I mean, there is a school of thought to say that these sources are unreliable. If there is no sunlight, if it's clouded, if the wind doesn't blow in quite the same fashion, the power generation for that particular day will go down drastically. How would you really handle that?
Now we have large reservoirs in the hydro system, so we can depend on them for backup if we really go for renewables. But apart from that, as per the approved generation plan, up to 2020 we have planned about 1200 megawatts of mega power plants to be added to the system, including 170 megawatts of oil fired power plants and 300 megawatt of LNG fired power plants, and another 100 megawatts of gas turbines which will run on diesel, and about 700 megawatts of renewables, which is in the plan. So if we implement that plan, of course we shouldn't have an issue in the medium term.
Yeah, Mr. Ralapana, we have been hearing about power generation mafias, the diesel mafia, the coal mafia. I mean, this is one of the most you could say discussed topics in this energy sector, that you find certain interest groups very aggressively pushing their various theories. So what is your take on that issue?
Yeah, I mean there have been a lot of interest groups who's been aggressively promoting their own brands of power, some directly and some indirectly. I think we need to have a vision for Sri Lanka on where do we need to go in terms of power. Especially how do we in some way insulate ourselves from these vagaries of market pricing, especially in the fossil fuel sector. And I think for that the long term answer is that how do we go to a grid which is more or less 100% powered by renewables, which is possible, depends on how long it's going to take. I tend to think that within about 25 years time this is definitely within our reach. And even for the current crisis, I think there is a large role that the renewables can play, especially with solar and wind and also hydro as well as biomass. And the question we need to ask is that, yes, there are some issues about availability of both solar and wind and what times of the day, what days of the year those are available. But these are all known. There is possibility to do the long term modeling and short term modeling for both. And so this is these are not random events. For example, the drought that we are currently talking about is entirely predicted. This is a elevated El Nino year, and in a El Nino year, southwest monsoon is depressed. The only thing that happened was because we had a massive rainfall which generated the floods, which is due to a freak storm, we actually got the reservoirs filled at that time. If that did not happen, we would have been in a much worse situation by now than what we used to. So people saying that these are unpredictable or not known is actually not correct. The interesting thing is how these different power sources, different renewable sources work with or complement each other. For example, when there is drought, there is also high amount of solar availability that is there. Right. Yeah. So in terms of when we use a very holistic and integrating planning mechanism, we can first slot in the renewable potential and see, okay, if we can use this type of potential under these scenarios, where is the balance? And then see how the fossil fuels can fill that. So this is a slightly different way of approaching a plan than what is conventionally used, fill everything with fossil fuels and then try to tweak around the margin on the renewables. So what we need is a slightly different paradigm in terms of how we approach renewables, because these are indigenous power sources. The second part around this, because you brought in an issue about cost, if you look at the cost for renewable energy generation, it has been radically reducing throughout the period of last 10 years or so. For example, in India now they are talking about solar power being cheaper than coal power. And that's India without much environmental controls on coal power, and therefore coal power being even more cheaper. So some of these things are changing, and as a country we need to put a very bold vision to get us out of this fossil fuel trap, and also by doing that getting out of the fossil fuel mafias, and plot a path for ourselves which will give us both energy security as well as access to energy which is out of indigenous resources.
Yeah, we'll be taking a short break. Stay with us.